2025 is now over and done with, and I actually think it's one of the better years for film in ages. There were truly exceptional films from a variety of genres that I really loved this year. From horror to comedy to action to drama, 2025 really had it all. So instead of boring you with any longer of an intro, I'm just gonna get right into it. These are, in my opinion, the 10 greatest films of 2025. Number 10 is No Other Choice. The film follows a man named Yu Man-soo who is laid off from his job, and after struggling to be hired elsewhere, and with his family's livelihood at stake, he takes desperate measures to ensure his financial future. The newest film from Park Chan-wook might not reach the heights of his other masterpieces, but this tragicomic satire is still sadistically fun and insightful. This is a film about gleefully being a part of the capitalist machine until it callously discards you when you are no longer of value. Man-soo is a character pushed to his breaking point, taking the relatable grind of the corporate rat race to its logical and deadly endpoint. Lee Byung-hun is wonderful in the lead role, so charming and magnanimous when life is going his way, and so hapless and desperate when faced with actual hardship. This worldly obsession with more, instilled upon him by his capitalist grind-set work culture, not only completely corrupts his own morals, but forces his family to suffer and adapt to the consequences. Man-soo's concerned wife can recognize the spiritual folly of his actions, but also comes to terms with her husband trading his own soul to a toxic work ethic for their family's ultimate benefit. This scathing indictment of our current economic climate would be deeply depressing if it wasn't so darn fun. Park has a blast finding Man-soo's extreme limits and then barreling right past them with sadistic glee. Because at the end of the day, we've gotta laugh to stop from crying over a future where we're all inevitably replaced by machines. Number 9 is Hamnet, which is an historical drama depicting the tragic circumstances that inspired William Shakespeare to write his masterwork, Hamlet. If I told you plainly that the inspiration comes from the death of Shakespeare's son Hamnet, it would not come close to conveying just how heart-wrenchingly depressing this depiction truly is. This is probably the hardest I've cried at any movie ever. It's relentlessly sad, almost to the point of being considered straight up misery porn. But I don't want to be reductive or disparaging to a work of art that moved me so deeply. I'll be honest and personal here that the emotional effectiveness of this film and my forgiveness of its many flaws probably comes down to my own emotional state when seeing it. In August of this year, my son was born 2 months premature and spent the first 36 days of his life in the NICU. Every single day my wife and I visited him in the hospital, and every single day it got harder not bringing him home with us. But we persevered because it was important for us to be brave for our son, because he was forced to be brave immediately upon entering the world and being hooked up to all these machines that make sure his vitals are okay and he's stable and healthy. And so yeah, when Shakespeare's looking at his son and asking if he'll be brave, I felt that in my core. My wife and I were incredibly fortunate that after 36 long days in the hospital, we were able to bring our son home happy and healthy. But the trauma of that hospital stay has affected us more than we probably realized. And so I think Hamnet was in many ways an emotional catharsis that was very much needed. Writer and director Chloe Zhao finds such knowing specificity in the grief and heartbreaking beauty in the memories of those that are lost. Jessie Buckley as Shakespeare's wife Agnes is earth-shatteringly ascendant as a grieving mother, who at any moment can act out in anger, love, or sadness. She already seems like a foregone conclusion to win the Best Actress Oscar, and you'll hear absolutely no complaints from me. There are moments where I felt like this story being tied to Shakespeare and Hamlet is an unnecessary dressing to a simpler story of a grieving family. Sometimes the Hamlet of it all feels like an outright eye-rolling detraction, like when a suicidal Shakespeare first comes up with the famous line, "to be or not to be." But by the end, when this immense loss is shared as a work of art, with Hamnet's story immortalized forever, the communal experience makes the personal emotions universal. The despair of Agnes and Shakespeare is shared with the entire audience, helping their own personal grief feel a little less lonely. This is the transcendent power that the best art can wield, and I'm so thankful to have been able to experience Hamnet when I needed it the most. Number 8 is Friendship. I'm a massive fan of Tim Robinson, but I was trepidatious and curious about how his sketch comedy sensibilities would translate when stretched to feature length. Fortunately, writer and director Andrew DeYoung has perfectly threaded the needle, starting from universal ideas like the male loneliness epidemic and the difficulties of making new friends as an adult, and allowing the plot to spiral out wildly into darkly comic madness. Tim Robinson's usual performance tendencies veering from over-the-top anger to silliness to depression in the span of a a moment is surprisingly sustainable over the course of 100 minutes. There's a real nuance and range in what I believe to be a genuinely impressive acting turn. The rest of the cast is incredibly game to play into the absurdity, Connor O'Malley pops up for a hilarious cameo, and the subway scene is the hardest I've laughed at a movie in years. Here's to hoping that Tim Robinson and feature-length comedies are a friendship that lasts forever. For the first 2 acts of Ryan Coogler's Sinners, it's my favorite film of 2025. Twin brothers Smoke and Stack return to their home in the South and try to build a safe space for their community to enjoy their music and culture in peace. The set piece in the middle of the film, where the power of music transcends time for a performance so fiery it metaphorically burns down the whole club, is probably the greatest piece of art put to screen this year, and all the while tension builds in the background, as white vampires pose a thematic threat, feeding on the music and culture of a people that they've already oppressed and stolen so much from. And making the vampire Remick Irish just furthers the thematic resonance at this movie's core, as he has suffered at the hands of the UK's oppression and assimilation of his own people, stripping them of their own language and cultural touchstones. Instead of understanding the unifying communal experience that Smoke and Stack are trying to build for their people, Remick preys on it and twists it to his own benefit. Unfortunately, when the vampire threat becomes less thematic and more violent for the third act action-packed climax, I found Sinners to be way less interesting. It's not that the action is bad, it's fine, it just doesn't feel anywhere near as delicately crafted as all that came before it. Once the action wraps up, the film returns to its previous highs. When Smoke's lover Annie says of their child, "You could hold her once you put that cigarette out, wouldn't want any of that smoke to get on her," man, that's just pure poetic lyricism. Number 6 is 28 Years Later. I'm a massive fan of the original 28 Days Later film, though I did have some reservations going into this new addition to the franchise, more than 2 decades after director Danny Boyle and writer Alex Garland left it. Their solo work in recent years, like Yesterday and Men, have been pretty hit or miss for me, and I feared this may have been seen as an easy return to public favor by cashing in on Cillian Murphy's Oscar win. But 28 Years Later is anything but easy. Cillian doesn't even appear in this movie. Instead, Boyle and Garland evolved their story in ways I found to be surprising and profound. This is the story of a young boy named Spike living in an isolated community whose culture seems to be stuck in the outdated gender and societal norms of 28 years prior. Upon reaching manhood, the boys are taken to the mainland to hunt and kill their first infected, after which they are lauded with a night of debauchery. But Spike is resistant to the ways of men like his father, and abandons his community to go on a harrowing journey in search of a doctor to aid his sick mother, whose ailing weakness has left her discounted and discarded by even her own husband. This journey reveals so much about the infected, as they've developed their own cultures and communities, however violent or primitive they may seem. This is a movie that values life of all kinds, and actively provokes the audience to question their own bloodlust. There is no climactic third act action set piece to be found here. Instead, there's a surprisingly profound and achingly beautiful meditation on death and the ways we honor our loved ones when they are no longer with us. The film's exploration of a community and ideology frozen in time also teases a sequel very enticingly in the coda, as Jack O'Connell pops up leading a gang of hoodlums inspired by the late Jimmy Savile. In this universe, the world went to hell before the real-life Savile died, and his beloved public image was destroyed by revelations of him being one of the most prolific sex offenders in the history of the United Kingdom. It's that tension between where we were as a society 28 years ago and where we've evolved nearly 3 decades later that gives this new film so much dramatic heft. The acting is great across the board, with Ralph Fiennes and Jodie Comer giving reliably empathetic and humanistic performances, though newcomer Alfie Williams as Spike is the real revelation. This film is also really impressive visually. The original 28 Days Later was shot on mini DV camcorders that allowed for quick setups and run-and-gun shooting, creating a grungy and harried feel. Unfortunately, it also looks incredibly dated and like it was shot on a potato. This time, Boyle uses a variety of techniques, including an array of iPhones that convey a similar feeling, while also allowing for some genuinely breathtaking visual sequences. And so 28 Years Later is not just my favorite film of the franchise, it's one of my favorite films of the year. The Spanish film Sirat opens with a text reading, "There is a bridge called Sirat that connects hell and paradise. Those who cross it are warned that its passage is narrower than a strand of hair and sharper than a sword." And yeah, that's the movie. Writer and director Oliver Lachey's film is a truly hellish descent into madness that is so unique and propulsive and twisted, it's sure to become a cinephile cult classic. The movie follows a father named Luis, accompanied by his young son Esteban on a journey through the Moroccan desert in search of his daughter who may be attending a nearby rave. On this journey, Luis, Esteban, and their dog Pipa fall in with a ragtag group of ravers, learning to appreciate the familial and communal unit this nomadic lifestyle offers. But there are several unexpectedly demented twists awaiting these travelers along the way that left me equal parts tense, shocked, and downright giddy. This movie is like if the drivers in William Friedkin's Sorcerer were accompanied by Fury Road's Doof Warrior in the middle of an existential crisis. Oh, and they aren't just transporting dynamite, but also massive speakers blasting chest-thumping rave music. The vast desert landscapes lead to some pretty incredible visuals, and the pulsing electronic score by Kang Ding Ray creates such an oddly satisfying pace and tension. While Sergei Lopez as Luis and Bruno Arjona as Esteban are working actors who turn in excellent performances, it's the cast of ravers who really blew me away. This found family of eccentric vagabonds were all individually scouted for their specific vibes and looks, lending a real authenticity and specificity to the film. But it's not just a lived personal experience that they bring to their performances, as they're all asked to carry some real dramatic weight, which they do with aplomb. This movie is a blast. I loved every second of it. Number 4 is Urchin. The smartest thing Harris Dickinson does in his sterling directorial debut is resist the urge to cast himself in the lead role. Instead, the task falls upon Frank Delane to carry this personal drama about a homeless man named Mike, struggling to overcome his addiction and make a better life for himself in a system that only ever seems to bring him down. Delane is a true revelation here, making Mike so sympathetic even when he's acting detestably. My heart broke anytime Mike suffered a hardship or setback, and I felt such pride and joy watching Mike in moments of happiness, like a simple night out with friends that is all too rare for him. The little touches like Mike buying his probation officer a present and excitedly asking her to pose for a picture with it go a long way in showing Mike's compassion for others, even when external circumstances and his own addiction lead to him struggling to reckon with the very real harm he is also capable of inflicting. It's such a tricky balance to play, and Delane absolutely nails it, delivering my favorite acting performance of the year. As a writer and director, Dickinson adds a few surreal flourishes, putting us into Mike's psyche of feeling like he may be cosmically doomed to repeat his own cycles of relapse and anguish. But for the most part, Dickinson's film is grounded and raw, with several early scenes even shot cinema verite style with Delane in character as Mike on the streets of London, interacting with actual pedestrians. It sends a message that there are very real Mikes out there, too many in fact, who deserve full lives and to be treated with compassion. Number 3 is Zach Cregger's Weapons. On January 25th, 2023, Weapons was announced as a new horror movie from the writer and director of Barbarian that was heavily inspired by one of my favorite films of all time, Magnolia. It immediately became my most anticipated movie. On February 2nd, 2023, it was reported that Jordan Peele fired his entire management team for failing to secure the rights to Weapons, somehow making my hype grow even higher. On August 9th, 2025, I finally saw Weapons, and it did not disappoint. Zach Cregger's newest film tells the story of an entire classroom of children who mysteriously run from their homes in the middle of the night and vanish without a trace. Told through segmented chapters that deliver different characters' perspectives on these events, Cregger slowly pulls back the layers at the heart of his story, revealing more sinister, more terrifying, more outlandish, and more darkly hilarious moments at every turn. Cregger has such a tight grasp on this movie's tone, expertly swinging from genuinely unsettling horror sequences to hilariously over-the-top hijinks. But the pure bona fide entertainment on the surface doesn't detract from the themes at its center. Weapons conjures up the confusion, heartbreak, and emotions of parents and communities affected by gun violence in schools. As over-the-top as Weapons can feel at times, a witch casting curses is just as nonsensical as the 233 school shootings that tragically took place in America in 2025 alone. Cregger underscores his feelings in the film's climax, delivering a crowd-pleasing victory, harshened by the reality that even for those fortunate enough to survive this tragedy, the emotional scars may never truly go away. Number 2 is Marty Supreme. Josh Safdie's new solo directorial effort follows a young man named Marty in the 1950s, willing to stop at nothing to use his excellent ping pong skills to achieve the American dream. Like past Safdie efforts Good Time and Uncut Gems, the pace of Marty Supreme is breakneck and stress-inducing. But with this latest effort, Safdie also expands his scale and scope, proving that like Marty himself, there's always more tricks up his sleeves. This character's study of a charming hustler wrestler gives Timothée Chalamet the greatest opportunity of his already sterling career, and he absolutely crushes it, perfectly playing the erosion of Marty's confidence into a blistering and desperate narcissism. In his destructive wake, Marty leaves behind old friends and new enemies, once charmed into his orbit, and those characters are played so authentically by the most eclectic supporting cast of recent memory. Gwyneth Paltrow returns to acting in a role that makes you realize how much we've missed in her absence while she was off building her goop empire. Odessa Azion establishes herself as one of the most promising young actresses on the rise. And then you've got magician Penn Jillette showing up in a truly inspired turn as a menacingly imposing wild card, controversial filmmaker Abel Ferreira as a scarily effective villain, rapper Tyler the Creator plays a charming and frazzled friend of Marty whose life is upended by his schemes, and Shark Tank's Mr. Wonderful himself Kevin O'Leary has a major supporting turn as Marty's benefactor, who at any point could be his most valuable ally or most loathsome enemy. It's not necessarily a stretch to see Mr. Wonderful playing a sharky businessman, stomping on cockroaches asking for his help and joining him at the top, but it is pretty revelatory to see him genuinely holding his own alongside established actors like Chalamet and Paltrow. With its 1950s setting, Marty Supreme is a harrowing exploration of a turning point in our country, where the American dream was morphed from aspirations of a better life for families everywhere to a capitalist drive for excess. It's not enough for Marty to have his own belief in his ping-pong prowess. He needs the world to know, and he needs all of the celebrity and wealth that comes with it. But it is lonely at the top, and the journey there even more so. Watching Marty's various harebrained schemes makes for a devilishly fun watch, and his setbacks feel crushing yet inevitable, thanks to a system stacked against him. Hopefully Marty, and all of us dreaming of a better life, can find comfort in the things that truly matter. Before getting to number 1, I do want to quickly shout out some honorable mentions. Avatar: Fire and Ash is blockbuster spectacle at its finest. Nobody is doing it like our cinematic Awa James Cameron. Splitsville is more than just one of the funniest comedies of the year. It's also a surprisingly incredible directorial effort, with some unique staging and camera work, incredibly creative set pieces, and a fight sequence so impressively staged it puts most action movies released this year to shame. Black Bag is just so incredibly my jam. If the entire film were just the extended dinner table scene of spies prodding into each other's personal lives, it may have been my number 1 film of the year. The Before trilogy is one of my favorite film series of all time, and so Blue Moon's reteaming of Richard Linklater and Ethan Hawke in a story set over the course of a single night is like catnip for me. It's an incredibly specific and insightful story of one man's ego death, and Hawke has possibly never been better? Give this man the Oscar. My absolute favorite theater experiences this year came from Weapons and Final Destination Bloodlines. I was already a fan of this franchise, but seeing this latest installment opening night with a packed crowd who all cheered and squirmed and howled with laughter made for a particularly special experience. Sure, there are technically better movies that I saw this year, but in all honesty, Final Destination Bloodlines might be the exemplary reason for why we go to the movies. And finally, number 1, my favorite film of 2025, One Battle After Another. I mentioned earlier that Magnolia is one of my favorite films of all time, but that's an opinion I also extend to Boogie Nights, Punch Drunk Love, and There Will Be Blood. So Paul Thomas Anderson had some pretty lofty expectations to meet for me here. One Battle After Another is his most accessible, crowd-pleasing work to date, but it's no less insightful, challenging, thought-provoking, and powerful. It explores the different forms that activism takes in our modern society. A character like Perfidia, as a member of the French 75, relishes the showiness of her work, but her actions are never performative. She's a truly tragic figure here, who gets fetishized and weaponized against her own people. The French 75's more radical acts are juxtaposed with those of Benicio del Toro's Sergio, who takes a more practical and lived-in approach as his community bands together to protect not just their own, but any like-minded revolutionary in need. In Sean Penn's Colonel Lockjaw, the film has a villain whose white nationalism and fake ideological talking points are used to play to the oppressive systems in power, like the Christmas Adventurers Club, in order to advance his own standing. His hypocrisy, as he fetishizes Perfidia and potentially fathers a child with her, proves how shallow his convictions truly are, as he stands for nothing but himself. The rules do not apply to men like Colonel Lockjaw. They're just wielded to oppress others and prop up their own power. Chase Infinity is a revelation as the teenager caught in the middle of these conflicting ideologies, who is allowed to be so much more than a damsel in distress, but her own heroine, who is an inspiring example for a newer, younger generation of activists. Leonardo DiCaprio is reliably great as her father, whose ideals and passions have slipped away with age, age, but who ultimately is there for her emotional support when his daughter needs him the most. His arc in the film is not one of heroic white saviorism, but one toward realization of how he can best act as a facilitator, looking hopefully toward a better future in the hands of a new generation. Johnny Greenwood's score is constant and sublime, the visuals are a cinematic feast for the eyes, and there are so many masterfully crafted and instantly iconic moments. What a treat that 10 films into PTA's career he can prove that he has even more tricks up his sleeve, making a film that isn't just thematically rich, but endlessly entertaining. Alright, that's it. That's my top 10 films of 2025. If you want my full rankings of every single 2025 movie that I saw this year, or if you just want to keep track of my up-to-date movie thoughts, you can follow me on Letterboxd at Josh D. Floyd. Let me know your own personal top 10 films in the comments below, and consider giving this video a like and subscribing to the channel if you want to watch more content like this. Thanks for watching. Bye.